Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
That did hit the rim, and Melendez can't pay it off. Offensive rebound, danger, and the slam works this time. 6 on the clock. Hawkins hooks a three. No shot clock reset. Got to get it up with 3 to go. And he drills it. Can't the backboard. Baseline, make it again. RJ Melendez.
Wilson fakes on a 3, dribbled in and kicked it out. He's still here. Airball chance. Here's Grady, a deep 3. He buried it. Grady Dick from 25 feet. Rebound, KJ Adams.
Should have numbers.
Here comes KU. McCullough to the cup. Right hand layup, good. And the foul, a chance at a 3-point play. Plays it right side to Wilson. Promptly back to Juan. They feed it into Kevin, posting up. Turns with a jump hook. Gets it to Carlin. It hung up on the front lip for what felt like 3 seconds. And then fell home. KU by 3.
Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. He's Damon Benning. I'm Andrew Rogers. DB looks much better on his camera right now. I think mine is still trying to connect via YouTube, where you can catch us right now, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. It's 590 ESPN Omaha. And then from the 9 to 10 hour, we will be on KFOR in Lincoln. Happy to have you with us on this fine Tuesday morning. Not too shabby after the 52-degree day we had yesterday.
Is that what it got to?
I believe so. 52? I believe so. It could have gotten a little higher, maybe a little bit lower than that amount. But if I remember checking during the show, it was 52.
Yeah.
Didn't you say 59?
I said something. Yeah, I think it's 58, 59.
Probably felt like 59 though. And
I think I was checking with Barry.
Yes, you were.
Yeah. and he hit me with the right forecast.
Barry.
I don't know if my family could kind of just sit with any sort of self-control for that long, for a couple hours, and just shoot the breeze.
Well, we don't have a 4-year-old.
No, I'm talking about like not my immediate family,
your family.
Yeah, my sisters, my mom. I don't know. My sister Kim, that's in St. Louis, you'd like a ton. You have very similar personalities, and it's weird.
I'm sure she likes emos.
She's an Aquarius as well, so she's February.
Does that matter? Okay,
I'm a big astrology guy.
Do zodiac signs matter?
I believe so, because I believe yes.
Does that really tell you about a person, or is it just coincidence?
I mean, it's a lot of coincidences if it is. My barber D Knight, he is huge into astrology and zodiac signs and personality traits.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool too, because he gets all walks of life. So, he tries to compare and contrast. But I didn't go outside much yesterday, except for
you and me both.
Except for one of my dogs has a toy, this little octagon squeezy thing, that if you give it to him, he's good for like 2 hours. Literally. And he'll sleep like a baby. But I'm a little paranoid because of the wet weather and the grass, so I don't want him along the fence line, because there's another dog next door that's out sometimes, and I just don't want any pawing at the dirt or whatever. So I stayed out there and watched him for a little bit, just to make sure, because now I'm starting to kind of train them not to go over there. Like, they know it's bad news if either one of them goes over there. They're still dogs, and they're tempted.
Yeah, they test the water.
But I should have stayed out there longer, because it would have bought me time in between streaming off from the West Coast Conference, watching San Diego and Nebraska because for being under time constraints, that game still seemed to take an eternity. And what sense did it make? If first pitch is at 2 and you agree to not start another, was it a pitch or an inning? Either way, it's tough. I think it was a new inning. After 5 p.m. Central, you weren't going to play a 3-hour game anyway. I mean, not the fourth game of a weekend.
You would have to think that game was ending,
right? I mean,
it was going to be short regardless. But they still got 7 innings and scored 32 runs.
So you'll do that. You can still play a rapid what's not. So there's a difference between pace and duration, right? Like the pace wasn't moving along. The time of the game wasn't super long, but between the yapping and the talking, and it kind of started. Coach Bolt wasn't super happy, I think, with the gamesmanship the first two days, and it could have come across kind of like sour grapes. But I think he had a legit gripe, man. I have no idea what San Diego was doing, but to only have 7 hits and score 16 runs was why that game appeared.
How about only having 4 hits and scoring 15 runs?
So yeah, Stu Manji, my guy, I follow him on Twitter.
3 hits or 9 runs on 3 hits, and it went like walk, hit by pitch, single,
is not,
then grand slam, something like that, walk, home run.
Not good.
I'm close.
No, yeah. I mean, it actually went walk, error, sac fly, bunt, single, walk, grand slam, walk, home run.
Yeah.
And they busted it open, and Nebraska proceeds to come back and score like 12 unanswered. But I am personally, I'm concerned about Drew Christo, because that's my guy. His dad, Monty, is one of my best friends. Remember, I asked him off air. We were talking on the phone preseason. Hey, how's Drew coming? And just can't get command of a second out pitch.
It's not just him.
Oh, I know it.
It's the entire back end.
So, but those guys outside of Christo are older. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, you would not expect your veteran pitchers to go out there and not be able to throw strikes. You would expect that out of your young guys, as you kind of settle in to the college game. Your first weekend series, the jitters are up, you're feeling it. It makes sense. But what's inexcusable is the ones that have been there before, been there, done that, and are still kind of losing all sight and sound from the game. What was the clip that you pulled up yesterday for the love of the game?
Clear the mechanism.
Clear the mechanism, right?
Yeah.
When Kevin Costner's on the mound.
We were watching that.
Sounds, let's just say it was loud.
Everything goes away, right?
It was loud, but you clear the mechanism, everything goes away. It was almost as if Nebraska couldn't clear the mechanism this weekend. They could not get sight of themselves. They would come in, and even some of their best guys, as you stated, and the first batter that they'd face would be a walk. And when you put a guy on base, it goes downhill quickly every time. That's how it works.
Pass after pass after pass after pass for Shanneman, and you're like, wait, what?
Did you realize that San Diego drew 20 walks and was hit by 10 pitches in this series? 10 pitches.
No, I thought you would be moved by just the 7 hits, but 16 runs. 7 hits, and they only left 2 on base.
It was the hit by pitches for me that, like, I sat back and doing a little self-reflecting, as I think Nebraska's probably doing right now.
Yeah.
And I sat back and thought, if I was on the mound, could I hit 10 batters in a series?
Yeah, I probably could.
Yeah.
Maybe not 10. I'd hit a few.
But we also don't play college baseball. Yeah. And this isn't a knock on Nebraska at all, because Will Bolt knows how frustrating it was throughout the series, watching his pitcher have no sense of command.
I wonder what Coach Christie's thinking. That's the thing.
Yeah, second tier there. But this is what Bolt said after the game. The simplest thing you could do as a pitcher is just throw the ball over the plate.
Yeah.
Or else you don't deserve to be on the mound. He didn't take it lightly on his team.
That's how he is
from the first series.
I mean, but I kind of feel like it's so early, so you just have to wait, a little bit. But and you try to flush last year. But I go back to the line that Coach Satterfield said at the coaches clinic, and it's along the lines of if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it, along those lines. But he said, hey, listen, the more you find yourself saying what they should do and woulda, coulda, more reflection of it is of how they're being coached. And so I wonder, like, what the talk is internally, because I think everybody felt good about the staff, the versatility, the arms. You had 2 quality guys, at least from a stuff standpoint, at the top of the rotation. But
that's not the problem. The starters were okay.
The first 2, I think, what was it, 5-3, 7-3, and that's not always indicative of how they pitch. So yeah, you're right. But I'll just be curious to see, like, because how long can you? What is it? Is it a month process? He doesn't strike. Coach Bolt just doesn't strike me as the type of guy that. I mean, what did he just say? You don't deserve to be out there. We're only talking about the first weekend.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
And if you can't throw strikes, you don't deserve to be on the mound.
It doesn't strike me as the type of staff that'll be super patient. So, I mean.
No, especially from the bullpen, too, because now you're starting to think.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with Perry, Buns, and Shanneman?
Right.
Not a darn thing.
Right.
Are you?
Right. Well, and when you look at the starters, you're going to have to now start to think.
Although Clark struggled a little.
I'm going to have to leave him in longer. Because if you don't have somebody that can come out of the pen, though, and at least be relatively productive,
it's early.
You'll have to think, at least at some point, maybe I have to give them a longer leash. Yes, it's early.
You got to stretch them out a little bit.
I'm completely there. But it may be at some point where they're like, who do you feel comfortable right now coming out of the pen? Anybody?
Not after this weekend.
Right. So, I mean, going into the next series, if we're just thinking immediacy.
I still want to know how Cristo lost it so quickly. His first inning pitch, it was crisp. Then the errant wild throw, the plunk, and then it's like, maybe
it's a snowball effect in baseball.
Confident. Oh, yeah. Yeah. See, I've said this for, I don't know, I'm 48, soon to be 49, so 33 years since I was a junior in high school. I think baseball is the most difficult sport of the true team sports to be good at. I do. There is so much downtime in between pitches and at bats individually. There's a lot of time to think.
Your mind wanders.
And
how many times do you catch yourself, if you're on the field, just looking at the other team's dugout or looking up into the seats or turning around and looking at it?
Clearing the mechanism.
Say you're at Haymarket and you're looking at the highway, right?
It's just it's a ridiculously difficult sport. And, even when you're on offense, you don't have the ball, which is weird. If you're going to be on offense, you're just always on the defensive. So the mental side of baseball is absolutely ridiculous, just because of the downtime.
Ridiculous.
Like, you make a play, you don't make a play you should have made. How soon before they get a ball back to you? Sometimes if you don't want the ball hit back to you, then it automatically finds you.
Yeah, the thing is, hey, another point that you just made is completely true. But if you make a mistake on the field, you're now thinking about that mistake for a long period of time. You can't let it go because there isn't that next play for you. Say you play football and you're a DB and you let a receiver make a 50-yard play down the field, but then, they're going to go after you again because you're like, oh, you just got beat. You make a pass breakup. Now you're back, right? You're there. But if you make an error in baseball, you're absolutely right. Who knows when the ball's coming to you next? And then when you least expect it, here comes that baseball on a screamer, a rocket, your direction. What are you doing?
It's funny you said let it go. I couldn't sleep last night. I thought I was going to go to bed, and then no. So I'm up and I'm just watching. Normal people, right? They just use their phone or, have an AirPod and they just listen to music on their phone.
Not you.
Nah, not me. For whatever the reason, I was on YouTube on my television, just downloading video after video. just song after song. I mean, this went on for roughly, I don't know, probably 2 hours. And one of the songs that came up was Let It Go. It was is it James Bay?
Yeah. I believe so.
So along, and on YouTube they show you like other songs like in similar genres or people have also watched or whatever. And the Frozen deal was on. Just so they had the cartoon video and then they had whatever the lady's name is that sings the actual real song.
It's not Elsa? Elsa doesn't.
Do you realize
she doesn't sing that song?
Hey, do you know I never even knew like that was a real song with a video? I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was just a cartoon song. No, that's actually. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Should I have known that? Like she has like a video, like a real MTV when they used to show videos. Video,
right? So if we looked up, say, A Whole New World from Aladdin,
that would be
would that have a music video?
I'm sure.
I don't know. I mean, I would think yes, but maybe not.
I'm sure. So then I went down this rabbit hole of like America's Got Talent, and I was watching the Nightbird, the young lady that died from cancer. I didn't realize that her husband, she had been married for 5 years, and once she had her diagnosis, like for whatever the reason, traumatic, like he left. Yeah.
Oh man.
And then she had like these mental health issues just from all the. So anyway, it was the top 10 facts on Nightbird that I scrolled through on YouTube.
Oh. Do you know what her zodiac sign is?
No, I don't. I do know she's from Zanesville, Ohio, though.
Zanesville, Ohio. Fun fact for everybody out there. Nightbird.
Zanesville, Ohio.
That is DB's gal, too, because I feel like her name pops up once a month. Every time I see you.
It's okay.
Good tie.
Yeah.
Good
so
tie.
I hope it's going to be okay for baseball, just because it seems like on paper there's such promise.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the fans were more than cautiously optimistic. So you don't want one weekend to spoil what's going on, but I mean, you got to figure it out.
Yeah, for me, it as much as I get on them for some poor play this weekend, I do sit back and remember that it's week one.
Yeah,
it's the first weekend, and you don't want to judge a team, especially in baseball, from one weekend. Now, you didn't grab a win though, so it is something to take note of. You can talk about the things that they can do better, but also maybe take away some of those positives. Like a name I brought up yesterday was Dylan Carey.
Yeah, he is.
And
what did he finish? 7 of 18 or 8 for 17?
I think
he was 7 of 18.
8 of 17.
I was close.
You were close.
Yeah.
You were close. No, but the freshman had 2 ding-dongs, one again last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say.
Moved him up in the lineup, too.
And let's just say he's not hitting the ball to the shortest end of the field.
Yeah.
Like, this dude is scorching the baseball.
Well, what they finished with in hits? Like,
in total?
Yes. Was it 20? I know they had 9 left on base, which was driving me bonkers.
Just yesterday?
Yeah.
Well, for the first 2 games of the series, they left like 18.
I know. I told you, runners in scoring position was kind of that ghost that was tapping them on the shoulder. But they had some guys that put the bat on the ball yesterday. So I wasn't so much.
17 hits yesterday.
17. So I wasn't so much worried about that. Although I don't know what kind of pitching San Diego and the WCC is going to have over.
And San Diego's a good team. Let's remember that
it's a good
regional
program.
team.
It's a good program. It's a good program. But did you feel like, yes, this is weird in the middle of the day. And the only reason I started to try to find a stream it is because the ESPN app, it doesn't start on time. And maybe it's just that my buddy Brian used to always say, blame the interns, like when scores weren't updated and stuff. But it was like.
Are you talking ESPN Plus here?
No, I'm talking like the app if I wanted to see the score on the phone.
Oh, just the updated live score.
It hadn't even started yet. And it's like 2:12, and I'm like, you're still, and it's like that with a lot of it happens with college baseball, and I just wonder if they just don't have access.
Yeah,
to
professionally, they're normally on it.
The scores.
Yeah,
like
college
time. So then I was like, you just do a little investigating.
Go to Nebraska Baseball's Twitter page.
Tell you what.
And there was one post that said, watch, and I'm like, all right.
So, the cool thing about that, though, is in those media packets, those media releases, there's always some sort of, they give you all the information on how to watch or listen to the games, right? So it's like,
it's user error most of the time.
It's like the human cheat code. Plus, with smart TVs now, I don't even have to worry about mirroring anything. Although I still don't know how to get out, and maybe you can't. Can you get out to the open net on Roku?
Yeah. I believe so.
You may have to show me that.
Because we used to have a Roku. Yeah, I think you can.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I know you can't for sure on a Fire Stick.
Oh, that's my baby. Yeah.
Then why do you have a Roku? You're cheating on your Fire Stick.
So 2 of the TVs have the good stuff. The one downstairs has the Roku. It's not a Fire Stick. What do you call the Roku thing that you put in your television? Just like a Roku.
Just like the HDMI plug-in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what the Roku is.
So, but I don't know if you can get out to the open net. So, I mean, it's Twitter.
I haven't had a Roku in forever.
Twitter will know in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, we'll see a comment come through. If you are tech savvy, or you just know everything and anything about Roku and Amazon Fire Sticks, let us know. 888-638-4876.
Yeah, we'll set the show, man. We got to talking about
rule changes in college football walking in.
Yeah.
Potential rule changes.
I didn't get it. But it wasn't great quality sports unless you're a Rock Chalk fan last night. Because West Virginia, from like halfway through the first half on, like boat raced Okie State.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you maybe watched Kansas, but it wasn't a great night for sports.
Yeah, Duke got another win.
Tell you what, healthy, they're a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're starting to get the full complement of their fellas. And believe me, Louisville isn't good, but Duke's playing much better.
Hey, Cal State Fullerton got another dub too. Watch out.
Stop.
Watch out. Here, hold on. Let me do the
Stop.
Isn't that a W? Isn't that what kids do?
Stop.
Do they do that? Do they do the W symbol?
Oh man. At prom night on Twitter. He did text me this. All right, my man Don. He said, "Why are our pitchers so afraid of bats? They fail. I swear, man. I've seen the math. They fail, throw strikes, ball 4, and stupid is no way to go through life, son." And then he retweeted the original tweet, and he said,
"He retweeted himself."
Yes, because he said it. Because he said it earlier, and he goes, "I'll just leave this here. Probably should just pin it for the season at this point." Hey. Easy over there. But man, it is crazy.
I'll tell you what, though. You look at San Diego's schedule last year, and they score a ton of runs.
I know.
So it doesn't shock me that Nebraska was trying to work around.
So you think that's just gamesmanship with the talking and bantering back and forth?
No, that's in this one in particular. There was just a lot wrong with the whole pie. Right, you put the pie in the oven, and it came out burnt.
I was trying to read Coach Bolt's lips about leaning into pitches too, because that I think drives coaches crazy. But
10 hit by pitches.
Yeah, that's kind of a lot.
It's a big one.
Kind of a lot.
Speaking of big ones, Creighton has a big one tonight.
Huge.
They'll face off against Marquette. We'll talk to Joel Lorenzi later on in the show, and we'll also break down a few things within that matchup as well. We have Brandon Vogel at 7:45. We'll talk to John Fanta at 8:30. Hale Varsity sparked my interest a few weeks ago. Oh, maybe not a few weeks ago. Maybe it was only a couple weeks ago when they started breaking down the roster. So I think we'll do that too. We'll start with quarterbacks here on the show. We'll do that today. Maybe talk celebrations in sports, postseason potency, and a lot more. Stay tuned. More coming your way.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome back to the show, 888-638-4876. If you'd like to get involved, it's Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency, alongside Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers. Shane Schillerberg is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see his little window on Damon's camera. So he's back there somewhere. He's pushing the buttons. There he is. Look at him waving back there.
Why am I not on camera? I haven't moved. My camera's
No, you're on camera, but I'm saying you can see Shane's little hand back there waving around. He can see himself.
What's up? What's that?
I'm just welcoming Shane into the show as well, along with everything else. And also, he reminded me, I'd be remiss if I didn't say we have Scott Dochterman also coming on at 9:45, which he was taking some heat on Twitter over the weekend in regards to Caitlin Clark showing at.
You know what's interesting? And
Pinnacle
somebody tweeted this to me yesterday, and I don't get that sense, so I had to like go back and look. But somebody tweeted to me yesterday. I think I said, we need to grab Dochterman just because there was a couple of things that I wanted to talk about with their NIL and in recruiting. And he kind of referenced Doc to like clickbait and like kind of just chasing responses. And I had to think about that for a second. I'm like, gosh, that doesn't sound like the Dochterman I know. Right. But everybody's vantage point is different. I just got into this fantastic conversation with a good buddy of mine. And he's kind of like me, and he thinks that I always judge people on how they treat me, not what other people tell me about them. And sometimes that can get you in trouble, I know, right? Because you could kind of lack objectivity. But that's typically my rule of thumb. Like, I let you prove it to me before and I learned that in teaching, right? Because some of the worst things I think that happen, and and I argue about this all the time, typically in my own household, whether it's a good idea to get case files on students when you transition. Because sometimes, yes, you do want to know what you're dealing with, but I always want like kind of a blank slate. So there's like this fine line. I don't want any preconceived notions because I want to meet you right where you're at. That's why I always wonder what kind of approach coaches take. Do they go back and do they watch film? The previous staff barely watched any of the former staff. Barely watched any. Rules watch practice. Not just games, but practice.
And I'd say
players
of the former staff last year.
So it's different coaches have different opinions. They'll say, hey, it wasn't my system, it wasn't my offensive sets. Hey, they're running 5 out. I want to run motion. It's different, So I always. But he was like, so I was going back to Doc, and I was just looking at his Twitter account. I think it's because sometimes he'll clap back. Right, but I don't know about I don't know about just for clicks though, because it's not really his personality, right? We've sat in the press, and he's not afraid to say good things about other teams, and maybe it's just because it's me. I don't know, but he's never struck me as that type of guy. But I wonder what Iowa fans think.
I was going to say, I think Iowa fans love him.
I don't know.
More times than not,
to be honest,
at least in the recent tweets and replies that I've seen, he's been more Iowa centric, and he has to be, right? He's the Iowa athletic writer for that college football program.
The greatest misnomer out there right now, though, regionally with these volatile fan bases. Where did we come up with the fact that we think Iowa fans are okay with 7 or 8 wins every year? Do you watch Iowa fans on social media? They don't appear to be okay with just 7 or 8 wins. Like, where do you think that came from? Because the administration is okay with it? That doesn't mean the fan base is. Because, there's some vitriol and some back and forth. I'm just like,
I'll tell you what, though. It could be because a lot of years they haven't needed more than 7 or 8 wins to win the Big Ten West.
You know what? What if that's their thought process? That's interesting. Because, like, what if they're thinking, boy, what if Nebraska would have thought that with Bo? 8's enough.
Like, get into the Big Ten championship game.
Whatever the hell it is.
Huh. Because you're probably not speaking that into existence. But if that's the floor for them, if the floor is that close to the ceiling, which was what I think some critics thought Coach P's problem was, maybe they think that's good enough to put them in contention.
And, of course, you want to win 10 games.
Yeah, you're not speaking that into existence like, hey, let's just win 8. Right. But history shows that you get to that 8 with the chance to win 9, that puts you in contention. That's good. I mean, that's funny you say that, because then I start putting some of the replies that I was hearing in their pressers all year. When he was asked the question about sitting quarterbacks, and he's like, well, what would good would come out of it. Like, so maybe they're already comparing. Like, yeah, I don't know. But I wonder at what point would a school have to have that baseline for success, where you're like, Wisconsin was probably in that mold. Hey, if we just do this, that's going to put us in contention. Let's just not lose games more than we try to go out and win.
Right.
I don't know if
it's what coaches talk about. It's
but I don't know if we
talk
could
about with your team.
Yeah, because I don't know if we could embrace that. We'd have to see it play out over time, because even when we didn't really like it. We saw what consistency looked like, but we didn't like. Then we got to the point where we didn't like penciling in losses, and even the great ones. Even T.O. had that problem. Gonna lose to Oklahoma again, huh? You're one tough non-con. You may struggle in that one too, right? And people didn't like 10-2, right? People grew not to like 10-2, so it's like, I wonder how
much the norm, because if
I wonder how much winning would have to occur for us to cross over into wanting to play it safe.
Say Ryan Day's team next year goes 6-6. That fan base would burn that city down.
They were losing their mind last year.
Right. But they lose their mind and they still competed in the playoffs.
6-6 may be too extreme.
Right. But
if let's say he loses 3 games.
Yeah, you lose 3 games, maybe even 4 games.
3 games, it would be a problem.
You're burning that place down.
So that's why
they're thinking they have to start over.
Like, what's the consistency of the baseline?
When you get used to something, it's easy to start picking on the little things, right? Ooh, this I don't like this little thing. It hardly has any effect on our season outcome.
I think Nebraska could win more than 8 games enough where you wouldn't want to go back to anything less than 8. More than you'd want to try to get to 10.
It's hard to say now. It's really hard to say right now.
Yeah, my buddy. So I got a guy, K Kuz, on Twitter. Since 2013. So for 10 years, has said, I've always said, it's easier to go from 4 to 8 than from 8 to 10.
Right.
So if you operate under that premise, how much consistency would Coach Rule have to have winning 8 games before you're like, okay, all right, we're going to get our 8. We'll see where that gets us. Versus, man, we got to get over the hump.
If in year 1 he gets more wins than Scott Frost ever got at Nebraska, people are going to be okay.
So he's just got to win 5.
He's just got to win 5 games. People would be okay with a 5-7 team next year. Because it starts.
You think?
Yeah, I do. Because at the end of the day, what are you going to say? Well, it's Rule's first year, and he got more wins than Scott Frost ever did.
I know what he would. I
Matt
know what
Rule
he would
wouldn't
say
be
if I
okay with
asked
that.
him. So, well, that's what I'm getting to. I know
but the fans would be okay.
I know he wouldn't be okay with saying 5 were cool, but I guarantee you, he would say, "Well, what does it look like?"
Yeah, what were our wins?
Like, what?
How bad were those losses?
He would be like, "Well, what does it look like?"
Break it down. Break it down. Game at a time.
But I think.
Plus, you're dealing with a new roster. You're trying to figure out who's going to be the quarterback, which we will get to later on in the show.
You know what? This may not be a popular opinion. I'm just looking at the roster. We're making some really basic assumptions that I would say, at least right now, not so fast. The wide receiving core is, we'll see how linear it is for Kemp Jr., where Washington is, and who can emerge. But in this offense, playing pitch and catch, I'm not taking that for granted. And then the other thing is, see what happens along the D line and the second level that plays behind it. We're fast forward into looking at the schedule. Spring, I think, is going to tell me a lot in terms of what I think we see in terms of movement and explosiveness.
And practice starts on March 20th. So,
which, by the way, we need to get to tease that. He made a change already that I like.
Hey, Brandon Vogel up next, though.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
We've got Brandon Vogel in the wing, but before we get to him, I want to tell you about our poll question today, which you can vote at H Varsity Radio. That is, if the Big Ten moves away from divisions and allows for 3 annual opponents each year, beside Iowa, who would be the second team on that list for you to see the Huskers play every year? Is it Wisconsin? Is it Minnesota? Is it a Big Ten East juggernaut, or is it a conference newbie? You can go over to the Twitter page and vote there, which I think is interesting. It's the future potential scheduling format I don't think it would cause divide, but I will just say it's interesting because it's different than the conferences that we're used to. But at this time, let's bring in Brandon Vogel now, because if I don't bring him in now, I'll probably forget about him like I did last week. So he's here. B Vogues, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, B?
Hey, this is something that I've been thinking about at least just kind of all week. And I'm going to start with basketball here, if you don't mind, because, even when this team was healthy, you could only see glimpses of postseason light at the end of the tunnel. There were some big wins, but also some tough losses. Peek into the crystal ball, right? Wish upon a star. Now the team, full of misfits, may still have a chance at postseason. What changed for you? What stuck out to you about this group that's gotten them this far?
Well, Keisei Tominaga becoming a 20-point per game scorer certainly helped. I don't think kind of the boost that this team has gotten from Sam Hoiberg was anything that I could have seen coming. Good player, liked him out of high school, but he's been excellent. I think maybe the broader point for me is, at that point in January where Nebraska had its injuries and we were looking at this, we're talking about Fred Hoiberg's future. I felt then that this program had progressed from where it had been in previous seasons under Hoiberg. And now you're kind of seeing it's kind of being proven to a greater extent by just picking up some of these wins. And I think the lesson there is that the change they made going into this year is that defense is largely a mindset and a work ethic. And yeah, you lost two really, really good defenders, but if you've instilled that to a degree, you can have some players pick it up. And if you get some good performances out of a guy like Tominaga, Sam Griesel, Derek Walker continue to be important. You can still make some progress. So it's been impressive.
What we were just talking kind of, about consistency and the expectation levels and how long you'd have to do something before we're okay with it. And let's stay with basketball to make the point, though. So now we're kind of talking about, hey, Coach Hoiberg could win. He could win 2 of these next 3. Some people think 3 of 3. Hey, why not go to Iowa City and win the last one? And that would put him at 17 and 14. And you're thinking, man, that is fantastic. 3-4 a month ago, we wondered if he was going to keep his job. Let's say they only win 2 out of 3. We still are happy. We're happy right now. Why do you think it varies in degrees of sports on how fluid we want to be or we're capable of being with our expectations?
A really good question. I think with Nebraska basketball, we're all well aware of the history. We're well aware of the no tournament victory in program history. And it doesn't diminish people's passion for Nebraska basketball at all, but it does kind of change the scale, I think. And, I was listening to some of your guys' conversation about Iowa football earlier. And that's an interesting one too. Human behavior is to always aspire to something more. I think the luxury from a program perspective, i.e. an AD down, your leadership effectively, is if you can be patient, it's kind of the most scarce resource in college athletics. And it's tough. You're going to have to go from 10 wins under Hoiberg to 11 to 14 or whatever they end up with this year. And it's hard. If you can do it, you effectively avoid hitting that random button, which we all like to talk about coaching hires. I love it as much as anyone. And to think hypothetically about who Nebraska could get, what it could mean. But in reality, it often just becomes kind of a roll of the dice, and you hope that works. And at a certain point, coaching tenures get to a point where a roll of the dice is better than what you're getting. I don't know that Hoiberg's at that point right now.
Transition over to football here, Brandon. And we're talking to Brandon Vogel, managing editor for Hail Varsity, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Keep it with that expectation and the expectations you have for the offense and defense going into the spring ball. Is there anything the average fan should be looking for to kind of hold them over until the fall?
Spring's going to be plenty interesting from a position battle, sort of roster sorting standpoint, that'll be a big piece of that. With the way Nebraska's spring football schedule works out, we'll have a preview of spring football in the March issue of Hail Varsity coming up. I think a big thing for me, Nebraska says it wants to run the ball. If it can run the ball, that's its kind of quickest path, I think, to finding some immediate success. You still got to be able to throw it. And I think the mesh of, a handful of different quarterbacks, potentially a untested, I guess, or unproven, I don't know which is the better word there, receiver group is a key piece of this. Like if I'm, watching spring football and we feel like we've got a good look at, some of what they're actually going to do, that passing game is going to be a big piece of it. And then defensively, feel decent about the secondary. I think it's kind of the front seven. There's some sorting to do there, particularly on the defensive line and also on the outside at linebacker. So those are kind of the key pieces for me as I look towards spring football next month.
So, B-Vogues, when I'm kind of looking at something or nothing, when we listen to Coach Rule and this staff talk, especially now that Casey appears to be pretty official, right? And he's ahead of schedule in terms of his health, which I think that's out there, isn't it? If not, I apologize. Whoops. No, I think we're fine. Anyway, anyway, B. So is it something or nothing? Is it familiarity? Is it the Collins Rule relationship, former Georgia Tech coach, that has him knowing more about Sims, that at least if you're looking for quarterback juicy sound bites heading into spring, that Sims appears to have the positive nod over Casey Thompson, who won't see spring at all? Is that
go ahead.
The thing, right?
I think it is the thing. When I look at it for me personally, if Casey Thompson was full go, expected to be there for the spring, he would be the favorite in that race for me. And when I look at, statistically, when I look at Thompson at Texas and then at Nebraska and Sims at Georgia Tech, they're pretty close. Like it's a tough race to call that way. But I do think there's something to be said from Matt Rule having access to Jeff Collins and his day-to-day impressions of the type of person and player that Jeff Sims was and is. But I think it's been mostly, well, if Casey's going to be out, at a formative stage in this new program that is emerging at Nebraska, well, that's a bit of a handicap. So I think it mostly stems from that. Speaking personally, I think that's what's probably changed the mindset for me the most. Now, hearing sources have confirmed to me, Damon, also what you mentioned, I think Casey might be a little bit ahead of schedule, which makes that interesting and knocks that back down a little bit for me.
Hey, you talked about untested and unproven when you talked wide receiving group in my previous question. But are you more confident then in the tight end room, because it seems as if they are also untested and unproven, but does their overall talent level outweigh that unprovenness?
Yeah, I would include the tight ends with that kind of unproven categorization. I do think, based on some of the players that they have, the ceiling appears a little higher. But, when I look at kind of the pass catchers as a whole, I think we're largely looking at a group that it's tough to point to somebody and say, well, there's your guy. And if you think about Nebraska at the receiver position in the recent past, you've kind of had that. You get into those oh crap downs or oh crap situations. You had a Stanley Morgan Jr., J.D. Spielman, Wandale Robinson, and Trey Palmer emerged as that guy this past year, which, I want to take a moment and acknowledge, like, that went about as well as it could have gone. And it's easy to miss those things, but at this point last year, all we knew about Trey was he was good enough to have an offer from LSU, was behind a ton of really talented guys, had shown some flashes, but we didn't know he was going to be the guy in Big Ten games in November, that if Nebraska needed something, it was just find him. And, it's easy to notice when those things don't work out. I feel like when they do work out, they kind of get a little bit overlooked. So shout out to Trey Palmer for reaching, I think, the way we all hope any transfer can go for any player.
B, no pressure in our last 60 seconds here, but you're one of the few with the mental faculties to maybe recall this. When's the last time Nebraska had spring football without it being broken up by spring break?
Really good question. Because I think Pelini almost always had it divided.
I
So
tried to walk myself through it with Drew down last segment, and we're going back some years.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, I think so. I can't remember one specifically. I'm guessing there was probably one in there that I'm forgetting, either under Riley or maybe
I don't
Pelini
know.
once. Yeah. I mean, you might be all the way back to Callahan. And I mean, it's a spring football schedule, but it certainly kind of caught my eye. It's like,
Hey,
they're going to do this.
We're going to get into why I think you did that. Appreciate it, B.
Thanks, Vogel.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Hey, coming up next, stick around. We'll talk just that.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
Top of the hour here on Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, and DB. I was talking to a buddy yesterday, and we were going through some scheduling things for his podcast and guests, and I'm like, man,
Were you hooking that up for me?
I was
Thank you.
I was keeping it balanced, but I was asking him, I'm like, I should know the answer to this question, but when does spring practice start?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh man, I don't know either. So I ended up looking it up.
Well, they just made the announcement.
And I'm like, oh great, convenient, right?
Yeah.
And I saw that it said March 20th, and I'm like, oh okay, so it would be timely. So for the backstory here, DB is going to guest appear on one of the Hurrdat Sports podcasts, which is the sweatshirt I am repping, not No Block, No Rock, but Hurrdat Sports. But the podcast No Block, No Rock is who he will hop on probably in late March. And I'm like, oh, that'll be good. It's
funny too, because somebody was that you? Who was telling me, like, oh man, one of those guys cusses up a storm, like, be prepared or something like that.
Oh, I said they have no filter.
And I was like, that's fine. I'm an adult. I may sound kind of silly, but
yeah, you're gonna sound like a preschooler in a room with like parent-teacher conferences.
So it's hosted by Mike Sauter then.
No, you know what? I should have. Mike Sauter is 10 times the man that these men are.
These guys. So Sauter was mad again last night.
When is Sauter not mad?
And just a subtle. Jacob Padilla, who constantly takes the high road, right? Not combative, nothing, right? He's just giving top performers a litany of statistics, right?
Great stats, by the way. Great stats.
Somebody simply says, "Hey, you missed
so and so
Christian Wynn." Jacob replies,
Hey.
"No stats from the Northeast game." Okay. It's done. Like, hey, I didn't have access to
out of
it.
nowhere.
And here comes Sauter
Pulling up in his Ford Fusion.
Oh, just passive aggressive as all get out. Mad. I'm like, could you not have done the whole kerosene, gas, lighter? Like, just keep it moving, Mike. Like, and nobody really clapped back, but I'm just like, those are the kinds of things. That's why he revs so high. He gives himself an aneurysm. It's like, dude, nobody's like.
That's what makes Mike Sauter
so Jacob simply tweeted the no stats, right? And Sauter goes, yeah, Jacob.
How many performers? Like top 12, top.
Dude, he went through like 15 guys,
okay,
right? And Jacob simply replied, hey, no stats from the Fremont. Lincoln Northeast game. Self-explanatory.
Right. Couldn't
get his stats, and I wasn't there. My man Sauter. Yeah, Jacob. Why did your very free to read without a subscription tweet miss someone? Super passive aggressive, right? Or why don't you follow along with every single game played while it was tweeted live?
Passive aggressive too.
As it was happening on Twitter, and keep track of who scored how many points for that game that you weren't at.
Passive aggressive 3.
Because you just can't upload the stats reporting system. I need answers.
That's the Mike Sauter we all know and love.
What are you doing? And why are you so mad? You're not drawing Jacob into that. Jacob's just going to whistle on by.
He's probably taking a nap.
He's like, okay, Mike, we get it. Somebody probably got at you for not following their kid, and you're mad.
No, that's never happened. Nobody's ever said something like that.
My man said free to read without a subscription. Such a Anyway,
let's go back to spring.
Good on No Block, No Rock, man, and the spring.
But I was saying, I'm like, oh, this could be perfect because and right at the forefront of spring, bring DB on. I'm sure he'll have
some
lots loaded up for that.
Yeah.
And spring begins on March 20th, which was bizarre to you a little bit. I don't want to say it was completely outlandish.
So when I first read it, it seemed late.
Right. And so
that's the first thing I thought of.
So then you kind of went into fact check mode and saw that, hey, spring break is from the 12th to the 19th.
Yeah.
And so they're starting after spring break. And that is uncommon for really any program, not just
so there's
Nebraska
there's three things that immediately crept in my head. Number one is, what practices is Knucklehead going to? Because he's trying to build out his March calendar, right? So that's the first thing I thought of. I want to know the practice dates, because this guy is going to be the type of kid where if everybody's going on March 25th, he doesn't want to go because he wants to see things in its more normal state, not hyped up on a big recruiting weekend. I'm like, look, man, with this staff, I'm just telling you, kind of what you see is what you're going to get. Okay. Let me think about it. So then we pit it against all the other practice schedules, right? Of schools that want him to come out. And almost everybody starts the first week in March, the first weekend. And so those are those two things, right? I'm like, okay, this March is going to be a headache for your boy. Just glad, hopefully they're playing in state, right? So get that out of the way. We're going to rest 3 days, then we're going to get after it, right?
Everybody.
Like that's the plan. And it got me thinking. I'm like, gosh, this is late. When's the last time Nebraska had a spring without a break of spring break? Because for years I would go back and forth, either in media or on the radio, about how that would drive me crazy as a player. Because, and partly, in full disclosure, I didn't know any better. We went for 25 practices, not whatever it is now, 15, 20 or 25. And we just went through spring. The break was when spring break was at the end. So you saw the light at the end of the tunnel. You did your 20 practices, then you thought, all right, man, at the very end of this, I'm going to get spring break. Cool. All right, we'll play this spring game. It seemed like Easter fell right after that.
Right.
It just seemed like that's how it works. So maybe I was misremembering. But it got me to thinking, this so fits his personality. He wasn't going to rush and do anything. The TV time slot available for the spring game didn't matter. Whatever else sports were going on campus didn't matter. He wanted an uninterrupted chunk of springtime to get his work in. They're going to work their ass off in winter conditioning. Up until then, you're going to take some active rest during spring break so you don't get your butt out of shape. It takes 3 or 4 weeks to get in shape. It takes 3 or 4 days to get out of. And then we're going to run through the gauntlet of spring ball. You weren't getting a week's break in between there. That's what I glean is right in this staff's wheelhouse for starting spring, because it is late. That spring game isn't until April 22nd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back into April. And, I think there's something to be said for this too, because, I feel like I bring up this example a lot.
I feel like a penguin.
Rule recognizes everything,
yeah.
Right? It's not just, X's and O's for Matt Rule. He recognizes how, the mental state of his coaches and players.
He has exceptional situational awareness.
He's got great situational awareness, correct. But I think another reason why he pulled something like this is to also give his players that opportunity to actually go back home if needed. For me, a lot of times, anytime I get family time, I take advantage of it. And Matt Rule, big family guy, as we all know. But anytime I get family time or I just need that getaway, I take it. I don't need to go to Palm Springs. I don't need to go to Fort Myers for spring break. I don't need any of that. What I need...
Isn't that a retirement community? No,
I don't know.
I'm totally kidding.
I need family. all said and done. And so when you're away, when you're in school, when you're a player, and you're going through some of the toughest conditioning out there, you're battling your academics, you're trying to find that football school life balance. Sometimes you just need a break. And if you start spring that early and give that break, yeah, that could work too. But at the same time, people are creatures of habit. They like routines. They like structure. They like a so-called agenda. So if you can go from strength and conditioning to break to practice, opposed to strength and conditioning to practice to break to practice, I feel like it's going to be an easier flow to adjust to as well. So I think it's more Matt Rule just kind of being 3 steps ahead of his players and where their minds will be halfway through a so-called semester, right? And all in all, at the end of the day, what matters most? Is it the mental health of your player, or is it that you got 5 practices in before spring break? And Matt Rule's going to care more about his player than he is going to care about, hey, I have to hit the ground running. As you said, I got to rush to this. I got to show the people that I'm here and that we're going to be this fight first football team. That's not going to matter whether you start 5 practices early or 2 weeks later.
And they're going to do so. I think, and I'm speculating here, so I want listeners to understand that. I think for him and this staff, the situational awareness is this. This is what we've been building up to during the setting of our culture piece. We're going to do things this way, X, Y, and Z. We're not going to deviate. We're going to evaluate the results. Then we're going to move on to the next phase. I think that blueprint is exactly how he would prefer to approach spring ball. I don't really want the week break, especially how the schedule is laid out. Yeah, we'll roll the dice and we'll start a little late. But I don't. I want to get a good chunk of work in. We're going to evaluate the results. We're going to have the scrimmage, and then we're going to ramp up for what the next data point is that we've got to get to. I don't really want the break in the ebb and flow because it just doesn't seem like it fits how he likes to do business. He seems like the guy that would say to you, if we're working, we're working. If it's downtime, it's downtime. I don't, maybe him personally hasn't really learned to manage downtime, but I think he does understand the importance for his players. He just doesn't strike me as the type of guy that's thinking about something and he's like, okay, let's do something for a week. Let's take a break and come back to it. Like that, on its surface, at the most cavemanish of thought process, that seems like that's how.
And sometimes you just need a day. Sometimes you just need a week, and it's recognized. Yeah, Eric on YouTube,
and don't put it in. He doesn't want it in the middle of what they're doing, though.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, put it at the beginning, give them their break, and then say, hey, now
let's go get it. Let's go get it.
Eric on Twitter says this too. Is it also that Rule is going to so-called notice who sticks around and works during spring break? Maybe a little bit if somebody is on campus, but I almost think it's more on the side of, hey, I feel like I have a good gauge after winter workouts who wants to be here.
That's
and I don't
true.
think the week of spring, the week leading up to spring ball is really going to tell if you say, guys, go home, have a meal.
I hear you, but listen, I need somebody else. I just talked to Abdul yesterday, Muhammad, for like 30 minutes. He'd know, but I hear you. And the older me says, yeah, you know what? You're right. But when I was playing, we were afraid to take time off. Right? Because
I get that too.
So that's the
I get that too.
That's the reality of it.
Right.
Like the reality of it is, wait, we haven't done anything for 2 days. Man, I feel out of shape. Or like,
but maybe that's also something that he's playing in his mind of, hey, if I do give you this time off, if you come back a week later and you are out of shape, now I know you're not really here to take it seriously.
Who's one of his favorite players that he likes that you brought up 3 times in the last month?
Oh, jeez.
It's easy when I say the name. Easy.
Gabe Irvin.
Gabe Irvin.
I got there. I got there because you're like, why would you ask me that question?
What did I bring up a couple weeks ago that as a reference point that Gabe Irvin was doing last year during spring break?
He was in community, right?
Tweeting out workout videos of him rehabbing his knee. And I mean, dude was getting it in. And I'm like, I just remember this real time. I don't even know if I said anything out loud. Maybe I did. Maybe I did. And I'm like, that's a guy that wants to play. Like, I didn't know anything about how he was going to come back or how he was going to work, but because it was like the Sunday or Monday of he'd only been home a day or two, and he was back in the workout facility doing these plyo exercises for his knees. And I'm like, that's a guy that's afraid to get behind because he knows rehab is a lonely place. If other people aren't working or maybe taking a couple of days off or going to see the fam, maybe just what other people would consider healthy mental, a brain break, he's like, nope, it's my time to play catch up. And I think the more people that are like that, as long as you can manage rest.
Right.
And remember what Coach Rule said, don't sleep on this. He was talking about the working out and the strength and facility. He says, hey, we got to figure out how we need to recover too, right? Part of how to get better is what haven't we done well in the past? We need to have our guys available and able to play in games. Recovery matters. So I'm thinking, okay, they're disciplined enough. I think they're disciplined enough to know when people need a break and when they don't. Why does that make me gush? Because I can relate to what I know. And everybody that knows what I'm about to say that played during this stretch, there were days in spring ball and in fall camp and for sure in bowl games where you question whether your legs would come back to you. Oh, man, I feel like dog poop. This ain't gonna work. We've been in full and all that staff would say is, you have to trust us. We'll get you ready to play. So as long as the staff is disciplined enough to know when rest is needed, then work your ass off. Because ultimately, especially in 2023, I swear to goodness, I'd love to go back and be in high school because I think one of the few things that you have to do to be successful in high school now versus then is just hang in there longer than the next person because people quit. So I just want to be able to, I don't even have to shoot. I don't have to be as gifted as, Amon, right? I just want to have to be able to hang in there longer than you. Because if availability is the best form of ability, man, I'm in. So if he can get the guys to think like that, I'm telling you, man, that's where the magic happens.
That's a good point. I mean,
that's where the magic happens.
And I've said this once before too. I mean, there were times where I didn't take the weight room.
Oh, you tell.
I didn't take the what's the word?
Workouts, the regiment, the day-to-day, the protocol.
No, I just seriously, I couldn't get there. I didn't take the weight room seriously, and because of that, I was only hurting myself. But there was nobody.
Isn't it funny how you don't really realize that?
But there was nobody else that wanted it more than me either. So I didn't see somebody and say, I want to be better than you. Like if I saw that everyone was doing the same thing, well, then I'm only going to do that or maybe just a little bit more, but I didn't have to do much entirely because nobody did much in the weight room. And so like that, I see that point. I see right to that point. I really
know what's interesting too. And it's like anything else. And my poor kids probably will make this a slogan on a t-shirt. I said, from day one, it doesn't matter if it was school or sports or whatever. I said, you're not competing against everybody else that you come in contact with. You're competing against you. When you become your own benchmark, that's when growth will start to happen, because you won't look and say, because the natural inclination is, oh man, shoot, I'm playing baseball as a freshman. Yeah, I know I had to move from shortstop, but I'm going out to center field. Okay, life is good.
I played right field as a freshman.
Right. Life is
Didn't
good.
want to play right field.
Oh man, ooh, starting against Texas Tech as a redshirt freshman against Bam Morris. Ooh, life is good. No coincidence that both those situations that come to my mind, the follow-up was poor because I wasn't competing against myself. It was some mythical barometer of what was going on around me. If I just would have simply said, hey man, I'm capable of being better. Hey man, I need a good week heading into UCLA. You don't think that sometimes keeps me up at night? Yeah, it does, because I wet the bed on national television, right? Like, believe me, all the things that you hear and see in like my personality all comes from things that I've gone through. So when you're parenting or you're coaching, that's my singular focus. Be better. Don't go through what we went through. I'm going to give you all the cheat codes to do what you need to do. Just trust me. Right. And so if Rule can build the kind of culture, that's why I said, did you catch what I said in the very beginning when I said active rest?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's going for a walk,
Right.
whether it's maybe jump rope, like whatever it is that may not be pushing weight, or maybe it's just your own body weight, where you didn't need that. Like, what's that spring break week going to be? How many guys will go home? Are they watching? Sometimes you need a brain break.
And that's what I was getting at right away.
Right.
But I vibe with what you said is, are you going home and getting a brain break, but also are you going to
Go get on a
you're
bike.
going to your high school gym?
Something that's not forced against the ground. Or
more times than not, if you are a college football player, you have some type of active gym back home that you train in the summer if you're not on campus. Are you doing that?
You think you get to a point where 4 or 5 days off seems like too many? Because if you sit around,
that seems like too many. 3 days is probably like a good max, a good cap. But at the same time, maybe it's, hey, I'm traveling home on Monday, right? You know, I'm at home Tuesday, Wednesday, and I come back on Thursday, or I'm at home Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, come back on Friday. Now we get back into it. We're back into the grind. I'm getting my body, ready to go for spring. 2 days left before things begin.
Yeah, secretly, man, I looked at that schedule. I told you the 3 things that were on my brain, but I quietly cheered. And I'm like, it seems kind of selfish. Number one, I get to set the calendar, but number two, it's everything that I would want. I don't want them to have the break in the spring during spring ball. But is it just because it's what I like? Or is it the right thing? Is it best practices? I hope it's best practices.
You may not know the answer to this question, but is this a Matt Rule thing? Did he do this at Temple? Did he do this at Baylor?
Well, I wonder, like, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, and it's just how the schedule broke. Right? Like, but I hope it's in, I should just ask.
Going right here. This is a good time to go to break. Maybe in about 4 minutes.
Maybe just, maybe the schedule just broke that way. But I just knowing him.
Sometimes that's just how the cookie falls, right?
It just seems like it's intentional.
Which one are you grabbing? Which one do you gravitate to? Let us know in the comments. DM us. He's at Damon Benning on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Rogers TV. Coming up next, though, we're talking to John Fanta. And this is one of the brightest minds in all of college basketball, especially in the Big East. We're talking Creighton Marquette next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hale Varsity Radio.
The crowds the last 2 or 3 games have been off the charts. I expect tomorrow night to be very similar. I mean, it's one of the biggest games we played here in a while.
1:24 to go. Nemhard to the bucket. Up and in.
Shireman.
Elevator play.
Ooh. That feels like a huge bucket. Baluma driving and finishing.
John Fanta currently on his way to Omaha for tonight's men's basketball game between the Marquette Golden Eagles and the Creighton Blue Jays. So we are trying to get in touch with him. But, you know, as travel days go, who really knows when someone's available via flight and when it lands and when you're going, if
That's
you're at
all
the
I could-
airport or you through security, whatever it is.
That's all I could think about last night with Nebraska baseball and the time limit. I was like, wow, if we're going commercial, man, you guys don't have much margin for error. And what time was that flight?
Well, if you quit at 5,
yeah.
would you say it's okay to say that the flight was at? I was thinking even earlier.
No way.
You think 8's a good time to get?
So let's say you couldn't throw a pitch or start an inning after 5. You're not getting out of there before 6. 35 minutes to the airport.
Yeah.
40 minutes for check-in.
Yeah, you're probably right. 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's probably a safe one. But who knows? I don't think it takes John Fanta that long to get through security as it does.
My man's probably flying
Nebraska
first
baseball.
class. Who sent him a plane?
I don't know. We'll find out.
John, good morning. How are you?
What's going on, John?
Doing great, guys. How are you?
Great. Do you fly first class?
No, I was in the back cabin today. I was on Delta. My rewards is with United, so sometimes I'll get the upgrade to first class with United. But with getting out to Omaha, Delta was the best route.
Hey, it's interesting, and we try not to be victims of hyperbole because there have been some big ones at CHI, but safe to say this one is the biggest of the season to date for the Jays in 2023?
100%. There's no question about that. And with the last couple of years, the way that they've gone, and COVID, obviously, I think this one just means more here tonight because you're going to have an absolute zoo inside that building. And Creighton and Marquette have played some epic battles through the years in the Big East. It's actually been one of the more underrated rivalries, if you will, because time and again, they've just played wild games. I mean, remember the year that a shot should not have counted for Marquette in Omaha? I'm sure Creighton fans remember that, and it ended up going to overtime, double overtime, and Marquette found a way to win that game. There's been times where Creighton has gone into Marquette and has won some crazy games. Last year, there was a game in Milwaukee that went all the way to double overtime. So, these two teams have played some epic battles, and I think that tonight is definitely the biggest game of the year for Creighton. It's the biggest game of the year for Marquette, and I expect it to be played at such a high level because you think about the Golden Eagles and what they do offensively, and you think about this Creighton team who's played as well as anybody over the last month. So it's going to be absolutely sensational in there tonight, and that atmosphere is one of the best in college basketball.
Yeah.
John, what are you looking forward to most traveling here to cover this matchup? And, how can Creighton rewrite the story from back in December?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the atmosphere live and being in that building because it's been too long since I've been inside CHI Health Center, Omaha. I have not been in person for a game in 3 years, so I'm really looking forward to being inside the building tonight. In terms of, how can Creighton handle this game and what do they need to do? Here's the thing. Feed Kalk. You have got to give Ryan Kalkbrenner the ball early and often. This Marquette team, guys, they want to play fast. They want to play a style that allows for more possessions and allows them to score because they've been one of the better offensive teams in college basketball. So I think it's really important tonight for Creighton to be able to say, okay, well, how do we hold Marquette at bay offensively? And how do we expose the matchups that they're going to have problems with? And at the end of the day, Kalkbrenner did not play in the first meeting between these two teams. But last year, guys, he combined for over 50 points in the meetings with Marquette and shot 21 for 27 from the floor. He was dominant. So, 21 for 27 from the floor against one team combined last year. It was ridiculous. So, Creighton has got to feed him. And they've got to find a way to guard Tyler Kolek. At the end of the day, what makes this Marquette team so special, what makes them a potential Sweet 16 Elite 8 team, is that they have had elite point guard play. This is a night where Ryan Nembhard and Trey Alexander have to be connected on the defensive end of the floor, and they've got to guard here tonight and make life difficult for Kolek. Because if you let Kolek get to the places that he wants to get to, Marquette can flourish because they've got the pieces around him to hit shots and to score the ball.
John, let me ask you this, because something has to give, right? We know what Marquette does inside the arc, among the nation's tops in two-point field goal percentage, near the top. The offensive efficiency is off the charts per 100 possessions. Creighton, the best defensive team in the Big East. Who makes the easier adjustment? Is offense more portable, or do you like Creighton's defensive prowess at home at CHI?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the Big East guys, these top four teams have not lost a home game in conference play.
Yeah.
That's absurd. I mean, the home court advantage does mean something. It means a ton. And I think it is easier for Creighton to adjust defensively against Marquette because at the end of the day, Marquette's going to have to shoot with a background of students going wild tonight, and there's no analytics or metrics that support it other than the fact that look at the records. I mean, look at the records. The home team has won in this league. And so it's going to be hard for Marquette tonight because I think they're going to go through periods of the game where maybe shots aren't falling. So how do they tough it out like they did last week against Xavier in Milwaukee? Now they did it on their home court. I do think it'll be interesting, and I don't know how you both feel about this, but here's the one thing that I think is interesting with Creighton. Creighton has been able to win a lot of these games that are grinded out, defensive wars that come down to 3 or 4 possessions, and they just gut it out.
Mm-hmm.
At Providence, different story. But what does happen? What happens if Marquette is knocking down threes like crazy? And this is a game that gets decided in the 80s. Is Creighton able to hit perimeter shots on the other side? That's the one dimension to Creighton. And it's ironic because whenever we've talked Creighton basketball over the years, it's Creighton.
Yeah.
But that's the one interesting dimension to Creighton is I'm waiting, and this is just for their overall good march. You're waiting for a team to come out like Xavier did at the Cintas Center when those two teams first met. And Creighton actually punched back. They were hitting shots too. But what happens if a team is hitting perimeter shots? Does Creighton have the wherewithal to actually answer with make perimeter shots of their own? I don't think that's what it will take tonight because I think they could just guard Marquette better than Marquette can guard them. But if it ever did come to that, I still have faith in Creighton. But I do think in that instance, guys, that's why you brought Baylor Shireman to Omaha. He would have to step up in that moment. He can't be missing his open threes.
John, got about a minute and a half here, but as you look across the Big East, it's not very often you see 4 teams competing for that top spot and being so close. You have Marquette at 13-3 and then a bunch of 12-4 teams below. In regards to looking at the tiebreakers and moving forward toward Big East Conference Championship play, what are you kind of seeing here? How do those kind of lay out? Where is your head at with all of that?
Well, this race is over tonight if Marquette wins this game. I mean, they'll lock up the regular season title with a win here this evening, but I don't think that's going to happen here. I think Creighton wins. Now, where's my head at? My head? Well, the remainder of this race, it could come down to a tie. And to let all your listeners know that if we do have a tie, because all these teams have won their home games, all their head-to-heads, for the most part, like Creighton and Marquette, their head-to-head results are the same, meaning there's 2 methods that this comes down to. A coin toss, which is not going to come down to that. It'll come down to the second-to-last method, which is the net ranking. And I haven't checked the net this morning, but the last couple of days it's been Creighton with a net of 13 and Marquette with a net of 14. So if it comes down to both those teams at 16-4, we will wait until Sunday morning. Sunday, March the 5th, the day after the regular season finale day, for the net rankings to come out that Sunday morning. You grab a coffee and you'll find out if you're the 1 or the 2 seed.
That's awesome.
John, we appreciate your time as always, and have fun tonight.
Looking forward to seeing you, John. Be safe.
You guys asked me what I'm really looking forward to in Omaha. I'm excited to spend that Tuesday in Omaha.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, more coffee and cream next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Hey, welcome back. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Any car issues since the snow came down maybe You skid out on the road, you hit the curb, you popped the tire, you needed to go somewhere. Where do you take your car, you ask? Oh, I have the answer. You take it to Dingman's Collisions Center. It is your one-stop shop for all your car needs. As DB said yesterday, he went in and there were people working on the front of the car, to the back of the car, to underneath the car, to on top of the car.
So you know what's cool? What they can handle on the fly. So meanwhile, they're doing front end work on one car. They're doing the tires on mine after the oil change, and the gentleman walks in right in front of me. I'm sitting in the waiting area, and he goes, "Hey, I'm Tim. I won't say his last name. I just called a little bit. My car was overheating. Do I need to call for a ride?" And whatever he told him at the beginning. And so his ride came like 15 minutes later or whatever. And I'm just like, how about just the range to be able to field a call of doing front end work on the Volvo they were working on. You got mine up there, just getting tires done. And then an overheating deal. Like you talk about one-stop shop. That's one stop.
And the response that you're given to while you're there. It's not like, hey, we're so busy that I'm going to take my frustration.
It looks like a car lot out front on 120th.
But they never take their frustration out on you. That's something that Dingman's is really good at is customer service and being there for the community. If you have any car issues, take it to one of their 4 locations or the standalone mechanical shop at 120th and Maple. They wouldn't be in business for over 25 years if they weren't doing something right. That's Dingman's Collision Center. DB, something that kind of had, we'll talk about colliding thoughts.
Howie Day. Collide. It's a song. You and I collide. Do, 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 do.
One more time?
Nope. No.
And it depends on what side of the fence you're on, and some of it has to do with age, and some of it has to do with sportsmanship. But celebration in sports. So over the weekend, we saw some things at the state wrestling tournament that got docked from team scores.
Mm-hmm.
And that was if you celebrated by doing a backflip. Backflips have kind of been like a thing that a lot of kids can just do now. I can't do one. I'm kind of jealous that, these kids can get up.
I know if I could, I'd be flipping my brains out.
Right? Exactly. But, it got me thinking about from all the other sports where you see backflips and calls not be made. We'll take football, for example. Tyreek Hill does a backflip almost every time he scores a touchdown or some sort of backflip, whether it's, I don't know what they're called when you do the cartwell first and then the
front handspring with a round off.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Do I remember your West Side kicker doing that?
No, he gave the.
Yeah, he gave the train engine.
Yeah.
Okay. Or the rounding third.
Yeah, he's
rounding third, right?
OTA is something else.
But why are
I'm dialed?
Why are we trying to limit celebrations? And I know the thought behind it. Like, you want good sportsmanship, you want respect, but is a backflip really the thing that is setting other celebrations apart? Because if you raise your hands in the air and scream, you're not getting deducted.
Yeah.
If you do 3 push-ups and you're acting like you're the strongest person out there, and then you do like a couple of fist bumps, you run into the stands, that doesn't get deducted. But why the backflip? And limiting celebrations are okay if it has any sort of taunting mechanism to it.
Yeah.
But backflips are harmless, I think. I mean, to me, I just think it's a very harmless celebration. I mean, would you rather them scream in the other person's face? Would you rather scream like Sauter and say the champ is here? Like, what are you looking for?
The champ is here.
Like, there is always going to be something or someone that takes offense to a move. But I'd venture to say if you polled 99% of athletes or 99% of the athletes at the state championships over the weekend, they wouldn't raise a finger to a backflip being done after losing.
Yeah. So I did a little digging. yesterday because I know Cody called and he said, "Hey, listen, you know, if it's a Higdon deal, then I'm all for it." And I don't necessarily think that the rule implementation started with Ron. I think Ron conceded.
Came from above.
Ron conceded being part of a greater good. I think we're talking about Ron Higdon with the ruling. I don't have any problems with it. I don't think the wrestling community has any problems with it. But I've seen this thing come like full circle. High school sports has always been pretty nostalgic, and there's a way to do it, and we still, you know, we do handshake lines, and there's just a way that I think the pageantry we think is representative of how we really feel. And even if it's not how we really feel, we say do it anyway, which seems counterproductive to
Wouldn't you say celebrations though are a part of pageantry?
Could be.
And not just in wrestling, but all sports.
I actually like the way you worded it though, because you said it's not taunting.
And if it had any form of taunting, then I'm like, okay.
Now listen, if he gave you one of these and he's back flipping and, you know, like, but I just think what I didn't like was kind of the whole comparing it to other sports, because I think wrestling it's different. Not only is
you didn't like my example of comparing it to Tyreek Hill. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. So what I heard a lot was well, in football that would be a 15-yard penalty. In basketball that would be a technical.
And
I
know what you're saying.
And I'm like, first of all, none of those things are policed at the end of sporting events.
Mm-hmm.
None. So why is that? And I don't know why nobody said that. I'm like reading all these responses and replies. I'm like, that might be the worst couple of analogies I've ever heard of. Like, those things aren't happening real time. I can do whatever I want to after a game, right? Like
anything you want.
We just referenced the kicker that made a game-winning kick. There's no time that expired. He runs around with like a madman talking about I'm dialed. He just made the biggest kick of his career. Nobody says anything. We celebrated it. So why in the immediacy after the match is over are we comparing it? Now, if he does that after he makes his first field goal of the game.
Well, I think you'd have something to say about it before.
No question.
the officials had something to say.
So I didn't.
But you're celebrating the person. Like this is a lifelong dream.
So have you? So listen, what's different? It's an easy conversation to get that analogy out of people's heads. I just watched Eli Gaith. He was playing for Millard North. I'm watching Millard North and Gretna. My man hits a game winner. Crosses a guy, hits a little pull up, bam, game over. They beat Gretna. There's still a little time on the clock, so maybe he thought that Gretna was gonna call a timeout, but the 2 seconds or whatever ran off. He stood at half court, kind of held his jersey up and just kind of untucked it, like just popped, right? If he does that after a 3-in game, yes, that's a technical. No one said a word, nor should they, in basketball. They didn't say a word to Tristan Alvano after football. Did anybody remember Millard South, Millard West baseball in one of the greatest high school baseball games of all time on the walk-off? No one said a word about the celebration. So if you're going to use team sports as your example, context matters. When the horn sounds 0 or the game is over, nobody polices that stuff.
Right.
And in wrestling, to compound or to further make my point, it's not personal.
And after the first 2 minutes, if they do a backflip because they're up 10-0, then it's like, okay, like this is taunting at this point, right? Because now you're feeding your opponent when you have to go back into battle. But it's at the very end.
You know, it's
at the end.
It's such double. I can't stand the whole double talk. Like, I'm kind of a consistency guy. Like, if I'm wrong, I'm going to be all the way wrong. But if I'm right, I'm going to be all the way right, right? Like, it's like, well, we need to make it more fun for these kids, and it's such a grind, and they spend so much time doing X, Y, and Z. But in the same vein, you're a little too celebratory. I know you worked your tail off cutting weight, and shoot, I watched two guys. Did anybody not see the what's his buckets from Nebraska puke on Sunday? And I was like, oh, it must have been a lot of fluids digested after weight cutting, because I just know what that looks like. But anyway, like wrestling, I don't know if it should get special exemption because I think it's such a difficult sport, but I think it should get special exemption. Like those guys and gals work their tail off. And if you have a little bit of youthful exuberance celebrating, man.
Do you see a backflip halfway through the wrestling season in high school after a win? No. You see it after you win a state championship.
It's just like,
and that's it.
I've seen kids jump in the coach. How is that any different than jumping in your coach's arms?
Mm-hmm. Same thing. It's all the same. All of it goes hand in hand.
I don't know.
I think people are just mad they can't do backflips. Be excited for the kids. Enjoy the moment with them. Don't limit it. Speaking of no limit, Joel Lorenzi up next.
No limit.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
9 o'clock here on Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, 590 ESPN Omaha. Now, KFOR in Lincoln from 9 to 10. We welcome all of you listening on KFOR. We're live on Twitter. We are live on YouTube. And we are having some fun. We will get into the quarterback talk for Nebraska football right around 8:30. We'll also talk to Scott Dochterman at 8:30, 9:30. My times are all mixed up, DB. After we get this
you know what it
hour.
is? It was too much sleep yesterday.
Probably way too much sleep. We'll talk to Scott Dochterman at 9:45. But right now, let's bring in Joel Lorenzi and talk Creighton basketball, the biggest game probably on the year for Creighton. Beat writer for the Omaha World Herald, Joel Lorenzi. Joel, what's up, man?
Good morning, guys. What's going on?
Oh, now wait a minute.
Yeah,
now,
we
what?
gave you
now,
15
come
minutes.
on, man. You can't be hitting me with the
15.
D'Angelo voice at 9 when we gave you 15.
What do you mean, man? I'm up. I'm up, man. How's it?
He's like, what
I thought, are we getting ready to go hit the studio? Are we getting ready to lay a track down? Or are we mad at like WAC 100? Like, what is wrong, man?
I could always go to the studio, but I'm up. Don't even try me like that. Come on, man.
Hey, so before we get to Creighton Marquette, did you at least enjoy a little downtime with the All-Star break?
Man, you know the All-Star weekend, every event was I'll use a cleaner word. It wasn't ideal, man.
It was trash.
I'm not gonna lie.
It's total trash.
That was the worst All-Star weekend I ever experienced. And I sat up till like 2:30 in the morning, or whatever, to watch the replay of the Saturday stuff because I was covering that game when all that was happening.
Yeah.
And man, I mean the dunk contest, I never got secondhand embarrassment from a dunk contest participant like I did for Jericho Sims, man. I mean,
that was bad. That was bad. So, Joel, we got to slide in one more NBA deal. So it's the one of the major sports, even hockey gets a pass because it's kind of open, icy, and people like to see goals scored. But the NBA, man, just can they recover to keep interest? The rating, it's atrocious. Like, they have to fix it. Can they? The only thing that's worse is the Pro Bowl. But even that was better than what we saw Saturday or Sunday. I don't know about that. Maybe it was. It was close.
Yeah, which is bad because the Pro Bowl is literally after the regular season, man.
Yeah.
There's no motive, and the Pro Bowl wasn't. I don't even keep with the NFL like I should. Wasn't Derek Carr starting in the Pro Bowl? Like,
sure was.
Good grief, dog. Man, the NBA they need more initiators, bro. They need like Ant Edwards type guys. Who Ant Edwards was pretty adamant about it after the game. The wanting to, and he's all around like an advocate for guys suiting up during the season when they're like 80% or better. Like he believes that if you're closer to being healthy, you should play. And you need more guys like that, man, because I think this new generation, and I'm part of it, but I don't think this would be me. Everybody's just too cool for everything, man. They don't want to be in a dunk contest because I was talking about this yesterday. The dunk contest used to be some of the best players in the league back in the 80s and 90s, and then I think even 10 years ago, the guys who would be in the dunk contest were like the budding stars who were about to cross that threshold. Now it's like Mac McClung killed this weekend. Don't get me wrong, but bro is on the two-way. Like,
right.
It's just different scenarios now, man. I mean, it's hard to care about it, bro. I guess I'm not sure how much they could turn it around with 1 year, but I think part of it is the overall, the gradual product of them trying to constantly tweak everything and like what is it? The skills challenge, like. like who even wants that, man? Like the constant changes and stuff have probably bogged it down, honestly.
Yeah, it does feel forced a little bit. But you mentioned McClung, and he's had hype forever. When he was at Georgetown, people were like, "Oh, watch out for Mac McClung." Then he went to Texas Tech, and now he's in the league, and he performs out of his mind in the dunk contest. But do you buy into the McClung hype?
No, he's not a great basketball player.
Yeah.
He's a good leaper. He's not a great basketball player. And the thing is, this isn't gonna like. I guess a good thing for him because I saw a graphic like he almost got his career earnings in one night of winning the dunk contest. But nobody's gonna go back and start watching his G League games or none of that, man. Like this isn't gonna. Sure, he might have a few more IG followers, and this sounds like real haterish, but it's really not. But stop laughing. But it's hard to like. I remember back in the day, like DeRozan was on the cuff of like stardom, and he was in the dunk contest. You had Terrence Ross, Serge Ibaka, these dudes, Blake Griffin, before he really
J.R. Smith
became Blake Griffin. Man, all these dudes would be in a dunk contest before they really either as they just came to the limelight or when they were about to break through. Mac McClung isn't about to see that, man.
Right.
So it's hard to cling on to these dudes who are in the dunk contest, which is usually their introduction to the league is the dunk contest, man.
I mean, sheesh, what about even Zach LaVine? Like Zach LaVine was at least somebody.
They're in the 10 spot,
Yeah.
at least. I mean, they got a chance. Hey,
They're
so
important too.
yeah, let's get to the matchup because listen, we know about Marquette's offensive efficiency. Calk didn't play the first time around. You and Andrew are having campfire s'mores.
Did you see what he wrote in his article?
Yes.
Please tell me the word you found in his article.
Having Calk Brenner hand-holding s'mores moments. I'm in. But, man, I want TA to get some votes now with Trey Alexander. He missed Marquette the first time around. How much will that matter in a team with Marquette that's offensive efficiency, especially inside the arc, is so dynamic?
It's a game changer. I'm not sure how much you could throw off Marquette off what they do because they are still a top 3 offense in the country. But any blow you can make to altering what they do and blow up their initial actions and get them into second side and third side stuff, which a lot of teams have probably struggled to get them into, even in the half court. I think that does wonders, man, for a 40-minute game. And obviously, when we talk about anchors, defensive anchors, Kalkbrenner is among the best of them, probably the best in college basketball. So it's a complete game changer. And then on offense too, like, and I think we saw this in the Providence game, I believe, when Kalkbrenner was in early foul trouble. I think we talked about this last week. It's just not the gravity of Kalkbrenner as a roller, man. Just the attention he gets because this is a dude that isn't going to span the post, not going to seal somebody off to back them down. Like, this is a guy that, doesn't need the ball to score, man. Like, he's going to take angles to get in a position to catch it where he will score. I mean, he doesn't have to put it on the floor. Very different than Oso Ighodaro in that sense. So you got to keep your eye on him, man. And it draws the defense. The angles he takes off screens, like, it changes offenses, man.
So we talked to Fanta at 8:30. We're talking to you now, and both of you said right then and there that because Ryan Kalkbrenner is featured in this game, that's going to be the difference. But is that enough to give Creighton the leg up in tonight's game? Just one player, is that enough? Because Vegas sure as heck believes that is enough, giving Creighton 5.5 in this game.
Yeah, I don't like Vegas. I'm not a gambling man. I think those lines. Can I curse on here?
No. Well, you can say anything once.
Yeah, I think the lines be BS. And frankly, man, I think Creighton might have an ankle up. I don't know if they got a leg up. I don't know about that. I think the line is like -5.5. It should be -2.5, man. Honestly, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Hey, we all are wrong occasionally. But,
Yes, sir.
I think this game is going to be really close, man. A one possession game, and because I really Marquette, with how well oiled a machine they are offense, this is the team that for most of league play has looked like the best team in the league, if you ask me. They've hardly wavered. They haven't really had that down. Since I'd say 2 weeks before league play started, when they bounced Baylor, they've really been on the come up since then. I mean, UConn kind of got a good win over them by a good bit, but Marquette has looked really flawless, almost. So this game is going to be really close, man. I don't know what people think is going to happen, but it's a one possession game, if you ask me.
Joel, let me ask you. And we were talking to John Fanta, and he's like, "Hey, listen, Nembhard and Trey Alexander have to be really connected on the defensive end to keep our guy from getting to any spot he wants to on the floor." And I asked you about the difference between he and Boom last week. I get it, especially with a couple of Boom's last handful of performances. But what's more important for the W? Is it for Creighton to be more connected defensively in the backcourt, or for Creighton to be more connected offensively in the backcourt to get Alexander the necessary shots that I think he needs to get to continue to be the momentum killer?
I'd say defensively, because I think once you start getting out in transition a couple times, you really get a defense on their toes, and then your half court sets get cleaner, and it just becomes harder to stop your initial actions and whatnot. So I'd say defensively, especially with such a good offensive team like Marquette, you really want to slow them down as much as you can. And frankly, I think, if R2 was to look like, and the difference with Boom and Kolek is obviously Kolek is going to have the ball in his hands even more than Boom, and you could try to force him to score these days, but that hasn't worked for a lot of people. He's actually scored the ball pretty well this year. So, and then of course, like, he passes the ball with the best of them. So really tough cover. So I think trying to put a lid on that would help them for sure. And then Cam Jones is one of the best scoring guards in the league now.
He's so strong.
Yeah, and so they're gonna need that, man. They're gonna need the whole defensive unit to try to figure something out. Because I think in that first matchup was really like they turned him into a scorer, but usually he's like a combo of like a scorer, playmaker, hub type. Really, the playmaking is the appeal. And Creighton managed to limit that in that first matchup. And you got to imagine a certain Kalkbrenner would probably allow that to happen again. But if he is to, become a playmaker hub and get some of those dudes involved, it could mean trouble for them if Creighton isn't on their, toes defensively.
All right, think about this in the context of the question. We know about Kalkbrenner's importance, and we talked about R2 and Trey Alexander. So in context, and I can't even believe I'm going to use the two names, but I think they kind of are because of Baylor's shooting from behind the arc and shot selection and Kaluma's last couple of offensive stretches. For tonight, who's more of the X factor, Kaluma or Sherman?
Well, I think they need Kaluma's intent. And I think, man, if he shoots it even close to what he ended up going to St. John's, they probably don't lose too many games like that. I don't know how many games they can win with the other going for 11 or 2 for 12. But it's hard to imagine he does it for a third game straight.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to consider that he shoots, 40% or something, and that can win them a game. But Kaluma, they need that intensity, man. The version of Kaluma they had all through January is a game changer, man. And then you factor in, the shooting, which probably felt like an outlier at St. John's, but if he even remotely replicates that, that we're looking at a different game, man.
Hey, when you look at Kaluma here, because I was talking to DB a little bit about this yesterday in response to self-reflection. When things weren't going right, he goes to the bench. He kind of has to find himself, but when he does find himself, then the confidence starts to, it's contagious for the rest of the team. It starts to boom, starts to beam. And, as you look at self-reflection for just any basketball player, how much greater importance does that have on a player's game versus, say, a coach trying to spark something inside of you? When a player comes to it on his own, how much better does that benefit the player?
Oh, I think a lot more, really, because why not? Who better than to figure things out internally than yourself, really? To see that
self-reflection is tough. Self-inventory is tough, real time.
It is tough, and everybody doesn't have the mental space to do that. See Ben Simmons. So,
great.
Really, hey, but when you get to that point, that wall, and you find out how to move past it, not just week to week, but in game, that's a game changer, man. You could just in game like that. It means everything. I think it definitely means more when you are able to, self-reflect and change versus, motivation from other people.
In your opinion, on March 5th, the dreaded reference to March 5th, the last time you and I talked about March 5th, it was Creighton running the table. But let me ask it to you a different way. When we get up after that weekend on Sunday, will we be talking about tiebreakers as a determining factor in the Big East?
I'll let you go after today. And today, I think did everything. I think if Creighton wins today, they have the confidence to win out, even having Villanova, because people can't overlook that at Villanova.
They're starting to get it. They act like they know how they want to play now too.
Yeah, and so you can't overlook that Villanova game, even if Georgetown and DePaul at the end of the schedule. Can't overlook DePaul either, because you're still
they've lost 8 in a row, Joel.
No, yeah, they're bad. I mean, you're the one that said at Chicago last time. But
He said, "Hey, I'm not just going to overlook that. You're not just going to slide that in." We're going to look on March the 4th.
If they do want to go perfect, they gotta just squash DePaul though, because DePaul. Remember, this is the team that beat Xavier when Xavier was coasting, and so I'm not saying circle the date, but. They got to squash them, and then so yeah, I think if Creighton wins tonight, we're probably talking about a tiebreaker or something. If they lose, I don't think there's a shot. I mean, there's 3 games left, and Marquette would easily have the leg up on everybody. So
could you see Ed Cooley to Georgetown?
I don't know, man. I go back and forth on this every week, and I want to say history and the Jordan brand and the things that tie into Georgetown make it an attractive job. But really, when you look at the landscape and put it in perspective over the past 10, 15 years, what is really attractive about Georgetown that would make Cooley leave what he's built and what he's made a real
popularity status?
Close to $4 million a year in a top 15 basketball job, I think people think.
Yeah. So is Georgetown on par with that? I mean,
I'm talking about Georgetown. You don't think Georgetown's a top 15 basketball job?
Oh no, I don't think so.
Top 20 for sure.
I think we're banking on nostalgia here. I think now, well,
that matters.
I mean, sure, but it would take a Jesus level coach to restore that.
Any
and I don't know
33-year-old
who-
carpenters out there?
Yeah, Cooley's a great coach, but I don't know if maybe he wants to do it. Maybe he wants to flip the house over there.
Always good.
Yeah, Joel, we appreciate you, man. Hey, enjoy tonight, and hopefully Creighton can come out with a W.
Appreciate it, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, buddy.
That is Creighton beat writer for the Omaha World Herald at JX Lorenzi on social media. Shane couldn't even let you get away with anything.
Man.
Comes in with the March 4th.
Just waiting to
4th.
bus roll me. We're going to look up on March the 4th, actually the morning of March the 5th, and Creighton ran the table.
Hey, we looked up on February 20th and saw Matt Rule grab his first recruit of 2024.
They could still do that. Run the table from now. I mean, whatever,
They sure could.
Is that right?
Run the table?
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
All right. So do you want the answer?
Yes, let's go.
So I wasn't giving him too much credit. It was absolutely by design. I've always done 8 weeks of training. Believe it takes 8 weeks to build players in a team. Historically, I've done 8 weeks leading into spring break, given them the week off, and then started spring ball. There's positives and negatives. The negatives possible is pull starting right after the week of, but 8 weeks is definitely needed. I had to bring in guys a week early just to do so. I'm telling you, sure as I'm sitting here without knowing any of that, what I say, he not only, so let's go back to what T-Mac texted me a couple weeks ago. Hey, he's implementing his system. That's why people believe. He's done this before. Okay, so let's operate under that premise. He's done this before. Yes, I have reasons to believe. But you talk about checkers to chess and realigning and doing things to date, bringing guys in a week early, weighing the risk reward, the pros and cons, what's worked before in the past, and then the execution of it. It's like Eminem, one of my favorite rappers of all time. He's just not afraid.
To take a stand?
Just not afraid. And I just had this feeling that he had mapped this thing out in his head.
Well, that's the only way that it makes sense with Matt Rule.
Right? Yeah, because that's just
it would be weird if it didn't have any sort of design to it. Yeah. If he just said, it's just kind of what I want,
and I wonder, and I figured I didn't think it was willy-nilly by any means, but maybe I did. I was like, maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Maybe it was just kind of how the schedule broke. So I double did my due diligence. I asked a couple people in the know in the athletic department. I asked I call him the captain. I was like, hey, Keith, when's the last time? So then he and I are having a conversation, which gives me a frame of reference to whether I even need to ask the question or not. Like, am I crazy? And I knew the COVID year but he wasn't even sure the COVID year they had the spring break to begin with. So we threw that one out. And it has been a while because it is late. You're talking almost the end of April to play that spring game. Nobody cares. You got 8 weeks. That's the number. This is the television date. We don't care who we're competing with. We'll work out the logistics of TV later. We're rolling.
And they're feeling good. They're feeling good about what's ahead. And
I feel a lot better, too, about the active rest.
Right. And speaking of feeling good, do you feel good about the quarterback room? We'll get into that next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hale Varsity Radio.
Welcome back to the show, 888-638-4876. If you'd like to get involved, it's Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hale Varsity Radio, powered by Currency, alongside Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, and we are live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hale Varsity Club. Wherever you get us, 590 ESPN Omaha, whether it's KFOR in Lincoln currently, whether it's on TikTok, live right now. We appreciate you joining us here for our segment on Positional Reset, talking Nebraska quarterbacks, and we're also live on Twitter and YouTube. So we appreciate having you involved on the show. Lots happening, but lots still to get to, as well as, you know, we head toward spring. winter workouts taking place. March 20th is the day that spring practices will begin. Where is your head at in regards to quarterback room? Is it Casey Thompson, who officially said, hey, I'm coming back to Nebraska yesterday on social media? Is it the new guy in town, Jeff Sims, who could be Matt Rule's so-called guy because it's the one he went out and got in the transfer portal? Somebody that he fell in love with, the ability, the big, smart, dynamic athlete, but it also comes with a little bit of turnover, inconsistency, baggage, right? Is it
fundamentals?
Yep, exactly. Is it, one of the other guys that we aren't even saying, Chubba Purdy, Richard Torres, Heinrich Harburg, all of these different names, Logan Smothers. There's plenty of quarterbacks on the roster, but who sticks around? Who stays? It's most likely one of the first two that we named, Casey Thompson, who, as you said earlier on in the show, is already trending upward in his recovery, which is great for that competition aspect Rule's been looking for, because outside of that, if Casey wasn't ready for that competition, wouldn't you think it right away it's just Jeff Sims' job?
And here's the beauty of it, Drew Down, is Casey's such a professional. He's polished in what he says. He's polished in what he does. You get the sense he's been here before. He's older. He's 20. He'll be 25. So he's not going to put anything out there, I don't think, to waste his time. Right? Pre-measured is what I'm saying. He's all business. And I'm just telling you, and he's a coach's dream and a nightmare at the same time, because I always tell players, and I always wanted to be the type of player that coaches were uncomfortable with if they were on the sidelines too long. You want to be that guy if you're not a starter. Man, I have such and such. I got to get him in, right? He needs a series, right? I had two really good starting onside linebackers, and I have another guy that I'm like, it makes me uncomfortable if we go 3 or 4 series and he hasn't played yet, right? So you want to practice that way. I'm telling you, that's who Casey Thompson is. He's the type of person that makes you uncomfortable as a coach if you're not playing him because he's capable. He's won a job. He's been benched. He's come back from being benched, and he's consistent in the numbers he puts up. 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 12, 13 picks is about just kind of pencil it in, right? And he's going to practice in such a way where he doesn't need a babysitter. So even if I win the job and I'm the quarterback, I know that guy's over there. He's going to go to work the same. He's going to practice the same. He's going to lead the same. He can make you uncomfortable as a coach, and I think he's exactly what Nebraska needs. And I'm just telling you, I don't want to overreach. So context matters, but hear my heart. I think I know Coach Satterfield's personality. I think I know how he coaches. I think I know his delivery style. I think I know because I've asked around. I've gone all the way back to directional Tennessee schools, just trying to do my homework on initial impressions and stuff like that. You have to be someone that can handle constructive criticism, be an adult, and know that it's not personal. Okay? I don't know. I'm not saying Jeff Sims isn't, and I have to say this out loud because people hear what they want to. I don't know anything about Jeff Sims or his personality. I do know Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson fits Coach Satterfield's coaching style. Now, maybe Jeff Sims does too. I have no idea. But I have to believe he has some of the components. Otherwise, Coach Collins probably wouldn't convey what he conveys to Coach Rule to even get him there, because we know the relationship between Jeff Sims, former coach that was let go the beginning of last year, and Coach Rule. He was his defensive coordinator, and they get along well. So Sims definitely has to have some of those components, but you never, at least you think, but you never know until you're in the fire. Competition, I think, for this particular year at the quarterback spot, in my opinion, would be good.
And not only that, with Casey, going back to your thoughts, because, I mean, you checked off a lot of things that fit what Matt Rule's looking for, but he thinks like a coach. Like, that's Casey
CT?
Thompson.
Yeah, for sure.
He thinks like you. That's another strength of Casey's game, because Rule wants a leader, somebody with that it factor, someone that protects the football. He
doesn't compound problems typically.
Correct. Casey can kind of stay in his lane, know what his strengths are, and not try to do too much, not try to overdo it. But something else that Coach Rule's looking for is somebody that's explosive, which I would venture to say that's more Jeff Sims than it is Casey Thompson when you're just looking into the talent bubble. Somebody that is good with his legs, somebody that can throw on the run, somebody that can make that extra play, keep it going, keep the same down going for a good period of time. But he also wants somebody that can take care of the football. And that's kind of been a drawback from Sims, at least as of late, with his youth and injuries and things like that. So each quarterback has something Matt Rule's looking for. But at the end of the day, the word that we keep using is competition. He is striking competition. You don't want to grab two guys with similar skill sets and say, hey, go for it. Because you know what you're probably going to get at the end of the day is you're playing it safe by doing that. And Rule's never about playing it safe. He's always about grabbing a guy that may not belong and make him belong, make him into something. So by grabbing somebody with Casey's skill sets of, hey, a veteran leader, somebody that thinks like me, somebody that is probably a safer play, but has gone through it before, being a starter, being benched, back to starter, and somebody that's young, somebody that, has maybe a more pizzazz to his game, somebody with that fresh mindset, that fresh look. By battling those two people together, you're like, hey, I know what I know what offense I want to run now with what quarterback I go with. They're a little bit different, and that's why I like the so-called competition word being thrown around with these two.
I want you to be careful, though, and I want the fan base to be careful when they talk about running quarterbacks and dual threat, right? And I'm not – sometimes I think we look at a guy and we think, oh, man, he's this. Now, remember, Sims is still only a guy he rushed for 300 yards last year. 300 on 87 carries. I don't have the breakdown yet of those which were designed runs, but that's nothing where I was like, ooh, super dual threat, right? Like, I just don't. The year before, he was 70 for 372.
That strikes me as somebody that can extend a play.
Okay, not necessarily that guy rushing the football. You go back to year one, 120 for 490. Again, that's only 4 yards per carry. Some were designed. You got to factor in sacks. I get it. I say all that to say there's nothing about those statistics where you're like, ooh, dual threat. Now, there's escapability and a scrambling component, but let's not just throw around threat. Because if that's the case, and I'm looking at a guy that's only rushed, who has, since his freshman year, has only rushed the ball more than 85 times once, I'm not sure about the word threat. That's kind of a negotiable, right? I don't know if I'd fight you over it, but I'm certainly not all in on the premise either. So is that RPO game? Is that the zone read game? Is if they're running GT counter and I want to hold the backside, am I going to RPO that? Like, there's lots of things I think you can do with that, but I know one thing two things you better be able to do in this offense. You better be able to go through your progressions, and you better be able to play catch. You better take what they call the stealing throws. That's stealing. You better be able to hit those.
As we continue our conversation with football, let's look around the Big Ten as we like to do a lot every week. Big Ten Whip with Scott Dochterman up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes.
Well, really not. But stop laughing. But it's stop laughing. But but stop laughing. But stop laughing. Stop laughing. But
Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Hey, before we get to our next guest, I'd like to take a moment and tell you about Acres Ale, one of our great sponsors on the show. It's brewed with Nebraska's corn. Do you like beer? This is a beer for you, because even my family that came in over the weekend from St. Louis, what we like to call the beer capital of the world, tried an Acres Ale and thought, wow, Nebraska can put together a pretty good light beer. And that's exactly what Acres Ale is. If it can wow my brother, my dad, it can wow you too here in the state, because it wows me every week. It's Acres Ale, crisp and clean with that light, refreshing flavor. It's locally brewed, and it's the perfect beer to wind down your day. If you're looking for an option, next time you're in the store, you're like, hey, I need something. I need my so-called cheat day. Whenever I'm having an alcoholic beverage, grab yourself a case of Acres Ale. You will not go wrong. At this time, let's change gears. We're talking to Scott Dochterman. He is the Iowa football writer for The Athletic. Scott, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Doc, man, I've been laughing the last couple of weeks
because
I feel like I kind of know your temperament pretty well. We talk enough when we see each other. And I'm like, I think he's kind of misdiagnosed on social media with his real personality. Do you find that some of the most innocuous comments that you may have, like, get pushback, or do you know what you're doing and I'm giving you too much credit?
No, I'm genuinely surprised by a lot of this. I seem to touch a nerve with just about anything I do, and I don't understand why. I remember about a month ago when I was doing something about Iowa's off season, and
whether or not they were going to be the favorite in the West. And next thing you know, I put something to the effect of that Nebraska was starting from scratch. And I got an incredible amount of negative feedback from that. And then I laughed this weekend when I see that Matt Rule said the exact same thing. And, and I think it's just because I cover Iowa, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a trigger or if it's just there's just something anti-Iowa in the water. But man, I'm surprised, especially with the Caitlin Clark stuff, because it's not unique that she brings out the audiences. And I understand that there was a huge promotion in Nebraska, but when you're looking at across the board, attendance is up 4,000 over average at all Big Ten arenas when she comes to town. But that seemed to really ignite the Husker fan base for some reason.
Have you seen a player like that, regardless of gender or sport, that has captivated the masses like she has been able to do?
No, not in any sport. I mean,
I would think wrestling,
a transcendent athlete.
Yeah, I would think
does so many different things where after the games, there'll be for 45 minutes she'll be standing there, autographing shirts or basketballs or shoes and things like that. I mean, she has a personality and a swagger to her that some people don't like, but I kind of think is, hey, it's welcome, especially in this era for female athletes, and she empowers female athletes. And I mean, when you see signs of, hey, I drove 450 miles to watch Caitlin Clark, and I've never seen anything like it. And there's another great athlete at Iowa right now, Spencer Lee, a wrestler, and he has the same type of impact, but that's really on the wrestling community. Caitlin Clark has it across the board.
Scott, there's no denying that some Nebraska fans may not like to give Iowa credit ever. So don't feel too bad on that front. Just keep doing you, because you spark good conversation a lot, and that's what makes you a great follow on Twitter. And if you're looking to follow Scott, that's at Scott Dochterman, and it's Dochterman. Hey, all bias aside for you, do you think Caitlin Clark's National Player of the Year?
I think she has to be. I mean, if you just take a look at the numbers and what she's been able to accomplish, she's second in the country at 27.3 points per game, and she's second in assists per game at 8.3. Last year, she led the country in both categories. And I could understand it if she was with like a team that was like 20th or 25th or something like that, and she was just putting up these insane numbers, kind of like you see in football where Heisman candidates are on a air raid, Heisman quarterbacks on an air raid or something. But I think in her case, I mean, Iowa's ranked 6th in the country. They're 14-2 in the Big Ten. They've got a chance to be a Final Four team, and they're very good. They got a chance to win the Big Ten title, or at least a share of it on Sunday if they win tonight. And you got College game day coming in. And then, of course, you throw on the excitement factor. And I think it's, Iowa's going to set the Big Ten record for women's basketball attendance this weekend. And I think all those factors should figure in that she is the most dynamic player in the sport and the best player and somebody who's worthy of that crown. And I understand Aaliyah Boston is a tremendous player.
Unreal. And
will be in the WNBA for years to come. But if we're talking about men's basketball and you had a male athlete average 14 and 10, would they get the Naismith over somebody who averaged 27, 9 points, and has 9 career triple doubles? I just don't see that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the only real peer I think she has would be, gosh, you got to go over to Villanova in the women's game. I don't even think you'd go to Columbia, South Carolina. When I'm thinking about it as a whole, Doc, you guys have had some big personalities, right? Caitlin Clark. I think I'm watching Riley Moss and all his post, All-Star Bowls, kind of his personality, his delivery. What is it do you think about being on that campus in Iowa City where, I don't know if it's fact or fiction, that you have to be a certain way and have a certain personality to function? Because I can think of about 4 or 5 athletes in the past 6 or 7 years that kind of buck that perception of docile, kind of go with the flow, hokey, kind of greater good thing.
it's interesting because there are some that are in that category, and there's some that aren't. I look at like Luca Garza and Megan Gustafson, and they were both Naismith Players of the Year as men and women's basketball, and they were everything that maybe the older generation, my generation, unfortunately, probably loves and respects, being kind of deferential. They had great leadership. They worked really hard. But then you look at, as you said, with Caitlin Clark and maybe some of the football players and what have you, and they've got really, vivacious personalities. And, I think in some ways it's up to each individual person. I mean, Caitlin Clark is transcendent. And the thing that kind of has frustrated me, and I think a lot of other people, is in some ways, I think people calling her out on whether it's Twitter or any other venue, in some ways it's sexist. I mean, she got a technical foul for saying "damn it" after missing a free throw. If they called technicals for every swear word heard on a men's basketball court, they'd be shooting free throws until everybody was out of the game. And so I think in some ways we need to kind of reshape our attitudes towards her. And I think she brings in a lot of the younger generation that kind of grew up with that, from the NBA. And she's just transitioning over to women's basketball. So her personality fits in perfectly with what people want. The wrestling team is always like that here. But I think it's what a lot of people really want to see, a great player expressing themselves in that kind of way.
Scott, I got to get at least one football question here with you because, you do such great work as well as all the other athletic writers that kind of work around the Big Ten. And there were some collective findings being done about the new scheduling model in 2024 for when USC and UCLA join the conference. And if they so choose to, the Big Ten Conference and school officials so choose to go that route. Based on your findings, do you like the model that won't include divisions, but one that allows for annual opponents?
I do. I think that's going to be a really good thing for the league as a whole, because we've seen a split in the East-West, and not only in the championship games, but early on when the East and West were there, the first 3 to 4 years, there were, even the point spreads were like 3 points apart. I mean, Wisconsin was a favorite over Wisconsin in the very first one. Iowa and Michigan State went right down to the end in the second one. But in recent years, it's been really kind of a decided advantage for the East. And you're seeing the Eastern teams continue to exceed their ceiling or reach their ceiling, and the West, they've kind of played downward. So I do think it's important for them to kind of switch up and go to a more, a holistic conference, one where everybody plays everybody. But I also think that the protected rivalries need to happen, because there are some that are historic. I mean, if they're going to say, okay, we're going to cycle up Ohio State and Michigan, then what do you do it as a conference? I mean, that's ridiculous. And then you see series that have history. Iowa certainly has history with some of its neighbors, and then some that have equity. I would say Iowa and Nebraska are that way. They played on Black Friday every year since Nebraska joined the league. I think we're waiting for that spark, and for some reason I seem to be in the middle of it every time it happens. But then I also look at USC and UCLA and coming in, and they play each other, of course. But I think when you look at 24 protected series, I think that's too many. But I think half of them need to be protected. The other half could maybe cycle off. And here's something that, that I've thought about, that I know I've discussed with other people, is if you protect 3 rivals for a 4-year block, and then you'll play everybody else twice over that 4-year block. And then let's say Matt Rule really gets Nebraska going, and maybe one of their protected rivals over that 4-year block is Minnesota. But something happens with PJ Fleck. Maybe he leaves. Maybe Minnesota struggles. That's maybe not a series that either side, but certainly Nebraska maybe wants to protect it. But the Big Ten might say, you know what? Let's protect USC Nebraska, because that's going to get great ratings. 2 surging programs in the Big Ten. Games people want to see, whereas Nebraska, Minnesota, if that's the case, might be, a hammer versus a nail, and it might be on BTN as the 5th option some Saturday. So I think that's something that will eventually happen, is you'll see a cycling through. Maybe USC opens up and plays 4 straight against Penn State or Ohio State, but then it cycles off every 4 years.
Scott, great stuff, man. We appreciate your time, and we hope to talk again soon.
Thanks, Doc.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Words are hard sometimes, DB. But hey, for all of you out there, thanks for joining us. Chris Schmidt, Eliza Herbal, coming your way later on this afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.